So this is pretty detailed just for people listening and watching. This is not where I just say, hey, I need a speech device for somebody, and they just throw anything at the wall and say, here you go. It's really,
Yes,
really facilitated for the individual. They get exactly what they need. That's going to be the best solution for them. And
yes,
sometimes that might not be a Dynavox. It might be something very simple,
correct.
depending. So,
Yep, correct.
hi, welcome to Assistive Tech Today podcast. I'm your host, Vinny Lavodi, and today we have a special guest. We have Rachel Clements, a SLP who is also a works for Tobii Dynavox as their funding manager. So, Rachel, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So Rachel and I have been talking a little bit for a while, and our companies. I work for Enabling Devices, and our companies have done some work together over the years. And I thought it would be a good, good for my viewers and listeners to, have Rachel come on, being that she's an SLP, and also a funding manager. She can basically give people some information on the process with funding for some of the Tobii Dynavox products, which are advanced AAC devices. So I guess Rachel, just give us a little background, on your background and what you're doing there at Tobii Dynavox. And
Yeah, sure. So I am an SLP. I live in Texas and I practiced in Texas as an SLP for about 10 years. And I primarily worked with the pediatric population and ended up getting very, very interested in AAC early on in my career. And from there, I started to work more and more on trying to learn the lingo and figure out how different insurances maybe require different things in order to get speech generating device approval, to get prior authorization approval through insurances. And eventually I became kind of this, SLP unicorn amongst my friends where I got very good at that. And eventually I started looking into maybe moving into a career adjacent role. And that's how I ended up at Tobii Dynavox as a funding manager. So in my role now, I manage a team that covers the South Texas region. We call it South Central.
okay,
And in the South Texas region, we basically look at all of the incoming applications for speech generating devices and or related equipment. So anything that's needed to access the device could be key guard, could be mount, could be eye gaze interaction. And then we review that application. We make sure everything meets the requirements for the insurance that the person has. And then we help obtain approval for that. And then we get to ship out the device and send out someone's new equipment.
and does Tobii do some type of training, I guess, with the device or um,
Yes. So as far as training goes for the devices itself,
mhm.
so there is a lot of pre and post support that Tobii Dynavox utilizes. So the before the devices are actually recommended, they often will send out a trial device based on what the SLP has requested.
Do like an
The
eval, like almost
Yeah,
like an
yeah.
evaluation to see if it's going to be a good fit.
That's right, that's right. And sometimes the trial, it might be just a couple weeks, it could be a couple months, just kind of depends on what the SLP requires or that insurance requires.
Right.
And then after that, we have an amazing team of solutions consultants that once people actually obtain their equipment, they get their devices, that they help complete a setup, they help provide training to the SLP and to family, other caregivers. It could be, it could be teachers, it could be home health nurses, just whoever
Mhm.
needs that additional training too.
No, that's great. This way you get, the devices are always important, but the support is just as important.
Yes,
And then,
absolutely.
if you if you're not familiar with the device or people are apprehensive because they don't understand it, then there's less likely that they'll utilize it till at least till its fullest extent,
Mhm.
where they could really benefit from it. That's my experience from just working in this field.
Yes, absolutely.
So, I mean, I know a lot of some of the Tobii products, and I know that they have some different or varying products that that you guys do offer. Um, I know you have the some of the more advanced Dynavoxes that have like some they can do some home like the smart home stuff. They're pretty advanced, and then they have those are like dedicated. I know you have stuff that's runs on Windows, and I know you have some Apple iPad stuff as well.
Yeah, so we offer both Windows and Apple-based devices at this time. So the Windows-based devices, they are either the i-series, which have eye gaze capability as well, or the i110, and that is a touch device. Then the Apple devices are called the Navio series, and they come in three sizes. So the mini, midi, maxi, they're just kind of based on the standard well, Apple iPad size.
Right, right.
That's what
The
they
mini, yeah,
correspond
the
to.
mini normal, and then the iPad Pros.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
So,
And there's also the TD Pilot. That's another Apple device, but that has eye gaze capability as well.
hmm,
And that's based on the iPad Pro size. And we also have some other products. So there's also a PCI. So that is another popular product that is used with Windows devices,
hmm,
computers, basically, to help with accessibility where a user might need to utilize eye gaze on even a work computer or even a home computer,
right.
then that's what that's used for. So that's also pretty popular.
And just for people that don't know what eye gaze is, they're basically just using their eyes to gaze at like a virtual screen, or it could be a virtual keyboard, or a bunch of messages that they just hover over and it will play out the messages.
Yep,
I
that's right.
mean, that's the simplified version of it,
Simplified version, yes.
right? Um, no, but that's great because you cover so many platforms. And I guess, again, all with the assessment, I guess it's based on the SLP that they're working with, um, to say what they think would be the best fit for the end user. Obviously, there's no two users alike.
Mhm,
Somebody might need, and I guess depends on their cognitive level. They could be, whether it's pediatric or it could be an adult that may be a stroke patient or somebody who's had some other injury that they just need, they need something pretty advanced, or it could be just a early learner where they're just starting out, but they need an AAC device. So I guess they'll
mhm.
make the assessment what's going to be the best fit for them.
Yes, that's right. And I did mention one really cool thing about Tobii Dynavox's software is that it is very customizable. So it can be customized according to the patient's needs, right? So whether that's a person with aphasia, whether that's a person who might have a motor speech disorder and they need more of a motor planning based approach. It could be that they don't need picture symbols. They actually just need kind of like a keyboard, like you mentioned.
Mhm.
Um, it it's very easily customizable, and that's one of the things that when I was a treating clinician that I really loved about Tobii Dynavox is it was so easy to customize.
Yeah, that's important because, some of this stuff is so advanced, but, like you said, being able to dial it in makes a big difference for somebody. They may not need all the bells and whistles, or they may need something extremely specific, and it's nice to know that the devices are customizable. And I know
Mhm.
that pretty much all the devices have accessibility switch access if somebody needs if they're not doing eye gaze and they need, switch access, like enabling devices makes a whole
Mhm.
host of switches, and they might need something very specialized so that they have a built-in interface to deal with that.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, Anything else that would be that specific? I mean, maybe more toward the lines because your specialty is funding? Like, how does that usually go about? Like, somebody comes in and, they have a child that might, if we were talking pediatric, they may have, I guess it could be early intervention. I guess it all depends on the age, but what are usually the normal steps? Like if they're saying, well, somebody thinks, maybe the pediatrician thinks that they need to have somebody eval them like a speech therapist, and then they decide they need to get, an AAC device. How does that steps usually go, to get through that with like Dynavox?
Yeah, well, I mean, it could happen a lot of different ways, to be honest, but maybe I'll go through the most common way.
Yeah,
So,
just
yeah,
just a generic, normal, like what you
yes.
like you said, just common
The
steps.
most common steps, yes. So the most common way is that if the SLP determines that an evaluation is appropriate, then they will typically conduct that evaluation. And the evaluation, it has to have a lot of different things in it in order to eventually submit to insurance for um, prior authorization or approval that they're going to actually pay for this equipment, which is very, very
Hmm.
expensive. So what the SLP does is they first start with writing an evaluation that really gives a lot of the background to show this is what has been tried thus far in therapy and has been ruled out. It has not been a effective means of expressive communication to set the stage for this is the type of equipment that they are going to need in order to be able to communicate and meet their daily communication needs. So after that stage is set in the evaluation and all of those other methods have been ruled out, for example, low tech communication boards, sign language is another one they make us rule out. Also, just traditional speech therapy. So maybe they've received speech therapy for X amount of time and still haven't made a lot of progress. Um, all of those things, once they're ruled out, the SLP then conducts a feature match assessment where they're going to determine what the features that the device must have in order to be able to meet their needs. So from there, after that's done, so after a few things have been considered, like the type of access, does it need to have touch access, eye gaze access, which we talked about, switch access, like we mentioned also. What does the software need to look like? Does it need to have picture symbols and text? Does it need to have only text? Matching all those things together, then the SLP will have a better idea as to which ones they might want to trial. So then, ideally, the SLP has trialed or ruled out at least two other devices and then recommend a third one. Usually, most insurances are going to want to see two rule outs. So you
Right.
don't have to actually physically try them, but you have to consider it and rule it out. And
Hmm.
then they want to see the third one, which is going to be the one that you actually recommend, the one that you have trialed. And that is the one that you want to show that it met all of the user's needs that you identified earlier in the assessment.
Right.
So yeah, so then from there, the SLP will have most likely requested a trial device, and that trial device is then sent out. The SLP collects all that data over a certain period of time, whatever that has been determined to be, and
Hmm.
they add that to their report to bolster it even further and show that it's medically necessary
Right.
that the insurance pay for the speech
Right.
generating device. Mhm.
So this is pretty detailed just for people listening and watching. This is not where I just say, hey, I need a speech device for somebody, and they just throw anything at the wall and say, here you go. It's really,
Yes,
really facilitated for the individual. They get exactly what they need that's going to be the best solution for them. And
yes,
sometimes that might not be a Dynavox. It might be something very simple,
correct.
depending. So,
Yep,
um,
correct.
yeah, sometimes they'll get some of the low tech things like, enabling devices does low tech items, and that might be
Mhm.
just suitable, or at least at that particular time, that might be good enough for where they're at their stage in life. And then obviously as people get older and progress, they might need more and more advanced communication options.
Right, and that's a good point too, is also the needs may change over time. So let's say that maybe they are an established device user and they maybe they used a touch device. Well, then maybe 5 years coming by, they have an ALS diagnosis, let's
I was
say.
gonna
Well,
say
now they need different kind of access method. Now they
maybe
have
eye
to.
gaze.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, another thing to note is that these insurance will usually have a time period that they will approve devices in. So, if you request it in 2026, then if it has a 5-year period before you can submit for reimbursement for a speech generating device again, then it would be 2031. So, it could be 5 years or
Hmm.
3 years. Those are the most common.
I guess it all depends on the insurance,
Correct.
what they do.
Yes.
So this is never static. It's always evolving, like you said, after they have so many years with it. If they need a
Hmm.
reassessment or they say this is working for them, or they, like you said, I was just going to say before you even said it, I know with ALS patients, unfortunately, the disease progresses. And for people that don't know what ALS is, or Lou Gehrig's disease, as it used to be called, Stephen Hawkins, the famous scientist, had it. And he, for him, he lived with ALS for a very long time. So his was, I guess, very slow progression, but not everybody is the same. So, and
Hmm.
I know he wound up using eye gaze and stuff later on as things
Hmm.
progressed for him. And back then, when he was doing it, they didn't even have half the technology that we have now.
Right. That's right. And I wish I knew exactly how many years that he was using, but I mean, it felt like he was using eye gaze for probably, I mean, at least a few decades.
He probably had one
Um,
of the first ones. I
yeah,
would,
he probably did.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, and another thing to note too is if you do have a patient that has a medical decline, that's often insurance will see that as um, they will see that as an exception to the rule of when you can apply for a new device. So if you demonstrate that there has been significant medical decline and their original device is no longer appropriate, then you can request a replacement that does meet their needs in a shorter time frame, if that makes
I
sense.
got you. Yep. Yeah, if their medical situation changes rapidly before
Right.
the before the 3, or say average 3 or 5 year time period, like
Yes.
again, we'll use ALS because that can be a rapid decline where they were able to
Hmm.
use, say, a switch access or even a touchscreen, and now all of a sudden they're unfortunately forced to just stick with eye gaze or something. So if their
Yes.
device doesn't support it, they do a reassessment.
Yes, that's right.
Yep. How long is there, I don't know if this is an easy question to answer, but is there like a usually like a standardized time frame, like when somebody initially says, okay, this person needs a speech generating device, like typical time frame it takes to do all those steps? Obviously, there's a lot of steps involved and a lot of
Hmm.
paperwork to satisfy everybody involved, whether it's, the therapist, the insurance companies, and then you, Tobii Dynavox as the provider of a device.
Yes, right. So that's a great question. It greatly varies for on a couple of different measures. So one thing that I think comes to mind at first is that there's not really an agreement in the SLP community on how long that you can truly um, do a trial before you can rule it out or determine that it's not appropriate, and like how long the length of the trials should actually be. Some argue that if you do your feature assessment correctly, you can narrow it down pretty fast to what exactly you need to trial, and then you can actually move forward faster. But there's a lot of people that disagree with that, and they say that you should have a longer trial period with more than one device, and you should spend a lot more time to make sure that you're truly getting what the user needs.
Hmm.
Then on the other side of the coin, also making sure that you keep in mind whatever the insurance that the patient has and what their requirements are. So for
Right.
example, United Healthcare commercial policies, they're one we deal with very often. They actually require a 90-day funded rental, which is what's called. It's a 90-day trial that's approved through them.
Through them. Right.
So we submit for that authorization to even do the trial.
Hmm.
So it can be a long process, or it can be maybe a shorter process. It could
Right.
be 30 days, it could be 120 days.
Right. So here's a kind of a spin on that. So I've been doing this for 24 years. So I've talked to many SLPs, I've talked to OTs, PTs, pretty much everybody in the business. But and I still come across SLPs that don't really deal with assistive technology as much. They might just have
Mhm.
more mainstream things. Um, so if somebody comes and they're looking to get assessed if the I wouldn't want to say if the SLP is not really familiar, like obviously you were already familiar with Tobii Dynavox, and a lot of
Mhm.
people I do work with are very familiar with your products. They probably could fast track some of these
Right.
assessments because they know if they're good at what they do, they know what these people can do and can't do. They say, this I think this would be a good fit just from their personal experience.
Mhm.
Does Toby offer like if I'm in Texas and I'm needing, somebody to do an eval, do they have a network of SLPs or people that are obviously trained on this various AAC
Mhm.
devices, whether it's Tobii stuff or other stuff like enabling low tech? Do they have people that they have like a network and say, well, you need an evaluation? Well, here's a therapist in your area that is obviously very familiar with assistive devices and can
Mhm.
give you a good and accurate assessment.
Yeah, that is not something that we currently have,
Okay.
but that would be amazing. I think there are a lot of therapists out there that do not really feel comfortable with completing an AAC evaluation
Hmm.
completely on their own. And part of that could be their their familiarity with that type of case,
Right.
and it could also be the amount of people on their caseload that actually need that, right? So
Right.
it's just not something that they specialize in, and I
Hmm.
think it is so detailed that you have to really know it in order to feel confident in doing that evaluation. Um, what I would say is that I think that it is very important to whatever company that you might be working with, that you might be considering their devices, is trying to partner with whoever they have in that region on the sales or solutions consultant side, is
Hmm.
what we call them, because they are the ones who likely have those connections.
I was going to say
Um,
their
exactly.
network.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have a network. Their region is usually relatively large. And so they know a lot of different people, and they might be able to help connect.
Right. Even though if the company doesn't officially have it, like myself,
Yes.
because I've been doing this so long, I have so many connections in different facets that sometimes I'll just
Hmm.
get a call from a customer I've had therapists that I've had since I started working for enabling, and they'll reach out to me from time to time to say, hey, I'm looking for something like this. Do you have any recommendation? And sometimes I
Hmm.
might know somebody in their area and say, hey, you know what? Here's somebody you could reach out to. And if they can't help you, they'll direct you to somebody who can,
Yes,
which is
that's
good.
right.
It's definitely good to have a network. And like you said, some therapists may not feel comfortable, but I'm sure if they've been around for a while, I'm sure they have networks with other therapists that they have friends or some colleagues that would say, you know what? Just like when you go to a doctor, like here, you want a
Hmm.
referral, here's somebody that's what their specialty is. Go see them.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I think it would be very beneficial if we eventually got to the point where I know Asha was considering at one point doing some sort of specialty certification
right.
for AAC or
Same
assistive
devices.
technology. And something like that would be amazing, because then you could essentially search a registry for someone who specializes in that and broadcast it. They have a certification in that,
Right.
and then, you're not even limited to where you live. I mean, you
Right.
could theoretically find someone anywhere.
Yeah, especially today with all the virtual stuff that's capable. We're capable of doing so many different things. It's pretty amazing.
Yep.
Um, so anything else that would be pertinent or really helpful information for somebody who's maybe just getting on this journey? They may just have a child or somebody that they just was recently diagnosed and they say, they're going to need to have some type of communication device.
Yeah. I think that I think that as far as the resources that I usually point to, just from my specialty, is maybe not directed as much towards caregiver resources as much as resources for SLPs, because that's who I really interact with on a daily basis, is trying to help SLPs figure out how to actually make that recommendation or get the equipment that they recommend, because it is so much more complicated, I think, than most realize. So a lot of companies, Tobii Dynavox included, and others as well, depending on what company manufactures the speech generating device, they will often have shells for evaluations, shells being kind of like an outline for items that you need to cover. So it doesn't
Hmm.
have like the words that you put in there, but it tells you what sections you have to cover
Okay.
generally in an AAC evaluation. And that can kind of help as a guide whenever you're writing. A lot of companies also will have their own systems online that they use. Tobii Dynavox's is called eFunding. There's also other companies that have ones like this as well, where you can, it basically makes it easier to submit information forms. So, like client release forms, things like that, along with the evaluation that you can write it in their platform. And then you submit it all in one place instead of having to like fax it in or
Right.
email it in or something like that.
Makes it easier.
Yes, and it will often have different pointers for what information needs to go where, and that can be really helpful, especially for someone who's new. Um, the other thing that a lot of people don't really think about, a lot of SLPs don't really think about, and this could go for caregivers as well, actually, is you can always check in to see if your insurance actually covers the equipment. You can basically call on either provider line or member line, and you can give the representative of your insurance, just ask them a series of questions,
Hmm.
and that series of questions can inform you of whether or not it can actually be covered,
Right.
or if there's any exclusions to the
Right.
insurance
Or they
policy.
may only cover partial, depending on what
Yes,
it is. And
exactly.
this kind of segues into another question, but I don't know if you'll be able to answer it. Is there any, does any of this vary with not only obviously the insurance companies and then obviously the devices, but from your experience, does it vary from state to state, or you may not be able to answer that?
Oh,
There may be
yes.
state regulations, they have certain
Yes.
criterias.
Yes, so very good point. So it will also vary state to state. So if you have a Medicaid plan, for example, Medicaid follows the state guidelines that the state puts forth, because Medicaid is run by individual states. Although we are all required to have a Medicaid system in all of our states,
Hmm.
um, versus Medicare, that's going to be national one. So that's the same
That's a
everywhere.
federal, would that be like
Yes,
federally
federal.
regulated then? Right.
Federally regulated. So that's going to be the same no matter what state you're in. But also individual policies that are in different states but are maybe the same insurance, it can get very confusing. Um, a good example of that is any of the blue plans, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Blue Shield, Regents Blue Cross Blue Shield. There's so many.
Hmm.
Um, those can get very confusing as well. I won't go into that too deeply
Yep.
here, but I do have a resource for that that I usually use to help determine what requirements you actually have to look at
Right.
based on where where your plan is. So
Right.
even though you might live in this state, it might be going by another state's guidelines.
Hmm.
It's very convoluted
It could
system.
be, yeah, it could be, yeah. Hopefully they'll, with all this technology we have, we can streamline this stuff and make it easier for everybody. But it can be daunting. That's why, I wanted to have you on the podcast too, to give some information. Um, and, but it's always good to, like you said, check with your provider first.
Mhm.
Do your homework, do your due diligence, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And this way you kind of have you have your own checklist of what you need to do to, see if this is going to be appropriate for you or you're going to be able to get it funded, which is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to remember to um, just continue advocating, because it is a field where a lot of providers, doctors included, SLPs included, they may not actually know a whole lot about this kind of equipment. And so
Right.
you might hear things like, no, I don't think that that's appropriate, or I'm not going to sign a prescription for that, or there, you might have to continue to advocate
Hmm.
for your loved one or for yourself. And just continue fighting the good fight and spreading the word and staying strong that you believe that it could be a possible solution.
Hmm. Um, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to just touch base on a few things. I'm assuming you guys do a lot of stuff with the veterans as well.
Yes. So that too, that usually follows a different process though. If it is going through Veterans Affairs, the VA, it actually doesn't go through my department
Oh,
at Tobii
okay.
Dynavox. I'm not sure maybe what some other companies do. It actually goes through the direct bill process, which is basically where we send an invoice to them and then they reimburse us for that.
Hmm.
So that's one good thing
That's yeah, that's why I
about those
wanted to
kind of
bring it
orders.
up because I've known stuff is a little different dealing with the veterans,
Yeah,
stuff.
good
It's
point.
not, it doesn't, it's not the norm as you would do for just a regular consumer.
Yes, that's right.
So it's good that I asked that question.
Yes, it was. I didn't even think to mention it.
See? Hey, I've learned a few things over the years just dealing with people. I talk to people every day, so I pick up bits and pieces here and there. Um, so Rachel, it's been awesome that you've been on the podcast, and I think this will be a very informative episode for our viewers and listeners. Is there anything you want to wrap this up with, or any, closing notes that would be, an important thing to sign off on with?
Yeah, maybe one thing that comes to mind is if anyone feels that they're listening that they just want to learn more, whether it's, about Tobii Dynavox products or if it's just about the funding process in general, or just information about how to implement AAC. That is something that can all be found on Tobii Dynavox's Learning Hub. It can be used by SLPs. It can be used by families. It can be used by teachers. It can be used like funding, like me. I still get
Hmm.
my continuing education there. There's all sorts of courses on there, and they're so helpful. There's a lot of really good information for a lot of
I
people.
see all that I get those emails, so I know that you guys do a lot, which is important.
Yes,
Knowledge
yes,
is power, as they say.
that's right.
And guys, as we always say on the podcast, everything that Rachel talked about today, anything that's pertinent and important, we always put in the show notes. So you're not sitting there with a pen and paper writing this down. We'll definitely have it in the show notes, and you'll be able to access that. And if they want to, Rachel, where can we also find you? If is there any other than going to Tobii Dynavox, any place you want to share that people can
Yeah,
find you if they need to reach out and they're in the Texas area?
yes. The best place is going to be LinkedIn. You can find
Oh,
me on LinkedIn,
and we'll
Rachel
put
Clements.
that in the show notes. Go
Yes,
ahead. Yeah. So we'll definitely put that in there, of course. That's how
all
Rachel and
right.
I connected. So of course I'm
That's
gonna
right.
like it. Should have LinkedIn sponsor these podcasts.
I know.
At the end of the day, it's always about people. Everything we do, at the end of the day, it's always about people. It's that human connection. That's one thing I always say. Without people, it's nothing. All this stuff exists because we need that human connection. So it's always great.
That's right.
So I think, like I always say, guys, this is another one in the books. I've been your host, Vinny Lavodi, for Assistive Tech Today podcast, and our gracious guest, Rachel Clements from Tobii Dynavox. I thank you for sharing this great information and your valuable time with us to enlighten my viewers and listeners.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
That was great to talk to you, Rachel. Guys, we'll see you all on the next podcast. Take care, everybody.